coffee, big cup, and hello. Welcome to part 2 of Battle of the Boyfriends. Last week, we summarized this batch of 4 episodes and had a more general conversation about why we care about shipping in this fandom in the first place. So if you haven't seen that, go back and watch that first, and then come back for this one, as it really sets the stage for our conversation tonight. We talked about Christopher and Jason, and then Dean and Jess, and we determined that Chris and Jess would go on to face our next two suitors in a final showdown debate, which is what you'll be seeing from us this evening.
We also had a slightly more in-depth conversation about our parameters for the judgment of these men, which included their ability to communicate effectively, loyalty, attentiveness, trust, respect, how they treat each other's families, whether they have similar interests and ambitions, and whether they're compatible in all areas of their lives. I like to think of these characters like my friends, and so one of my personal considerations for comparison is which relationships would be the most psychologically healthy for them and everyone around them. If I knew them in real life and was trying to give them advice, what would I say about each of these guys? So despite the fact that this is fictional and dramatized, I want to root for this kind of realism when it comes to the relationships that are so important to this show. I want more good decisions and healthy relationships modeled in media. So I'm applying what I know about that in real life instead of just picking like who I think is the dreamiest.
Mm-hmm. You'll still lose this fight, but it's okay.
We'll leave that up to we'll leave it up to the fans. Drop us comments.
Before we really get going, just please remember to do all of this YouTube things for us. Please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share this to anyone else who you think is going to want to pick a side in terms of Team Jess, Team Dean, whomever, Team Chris, as we debate tonight. And we always appreciate that support. But without further ado, this bloodbath is about to get started.
Ding ding, round 1, Chris versus Luke. This one's going to be a little easier because, honestly, it's not as contentious.
Yeah, we have 2 debates that we're going to hit you with this evening. Chris versus Luke, and then Jess versus Logan. I think we both collectively have more to say on the latter. So we're going to get Lorelai's men out of the way first, which is not to diminish them. We still have thoughts, but we're going to approach those guys first.
It's just less contentious. This is the lightweight knockout round of this particular battle. So I'm going to start off by devil's advocating for Christopher a little bit here. He's known Lorelai since they were 6. They have so much history and so much chemistry, and I feel like I'm one of the few people who doesn't hate the marriage plotline. I mean, I don't think they should have ended up together ultimately. I don't think that was ever the plan, no matter who the writers were. But I feel like he was one of those unanswered questions in Lorelai's life that she really did need some closure on. And she really needed to be able to give it a try with him before she could fully maybe move forward in life, because she was almost arrested in her development at 16. And it's part of the reason she kind of always went back to Christopher time and time again. You know, when he was there in season 1, she almost slips into it a little bit. Obviously, they get jiggy with it on the spot from which was Rory's initial emanation after their parents fought and Strub and Francine got kicked out. They just kind of reverted a little bit to their old ways there. And not long after that, Chris shows up in town for the debutante ball, and there's a ton of like obvious chemistry and history. They were, kind of both raised in that same world, and it was really apparent when you could see how well they could both dance and how much, grace they showed. They had such great banter with each other as well, and that was really demonstrated in that episode. And then obviously, Sherry comes into the picture and screws up the timing for them. Finally, Christopher is getting it together a little bit, and unfortunately, it's not with Lorelai, and Emily takes umbrage at that. Obviously, she shouldn't have blamed Lorelai for what happened. I think that was inappropriate, but I also think she did make a somewhat decent point about the fact that, like, Lorelai keeping Chris at arm's length for so long might have been why he never really stepped up for her or for Rory. He always felt intimidated by their connection. He even said something like, God knows she doesn't need anyone but you, to Lorelai. And, I think he was kind of kept out a little bit, and it intimidated him. It kept him away from them longer than maybe he would have liked. And it was clear that he always held a bit of a flame for her, but her repeated rejections of him caused him to seek that validation and that love and care elsewhere, rightly so. And so obviously that kind of sets Emily off, unfortunately. Takes it out on Lorelai, which little internalized misogyny at blaming Lorelai for Chris's choices in some cases. But again, Lorelai could have been a little more inclusive. Just because you have the door open to Rory doesn't mean like you're actively seeking to include him in raising her. So she's not totally blameless in the situation. And then obviously we have Suki's wedding and them almost getting together, but just, they can't get started. And up until Sherry leaves, there's really no chance for them. But she gets with Luke, and she's a lot happier with Luke than she ever would be with Chris. Again, I'm devil's advocating. I'm sorry. This is a hard argument to make, trust me. But just seeing his struggles with Gigi and how Lorelai steps up for them, it really shows just how deep that care is. They really do care about each other, and they're always there for each other. They're kind of the person that the other one calls whenever something is going on. And that's a testament to the strength of their friendship and their relationship that shouldn't be understated. And, it takes a fairly dramatic breakup with Luke to finally get them to where they need to be. And obviously we see it doesn't really end well, but I know a lot of people don't like Christopher. But I think he was actually a decent match for Lorelai. Like, is he the best person? No. But neither is Lorelai. They're both kind of in a very similar headspace. They come from similar worlds. They understand each other. They have phenomenal chemistry. So I think he's really a great match for her on a lot of levels. Is he ultimately the right guy? You tell us.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So that's our intro to Chris. Now let's have, your baseline argument for good old Luke Danes.
Okay, so Luke comes into Lorelai's life obviously a lot later than Chris ever did. By the time that he starts familiarizing himself and getting to know this woman, Rory is an elementary school age child. But right from the get-go, one of the things that I will always go to bat for Luke for is the investment and the interest that he took in Rory's life. And if you're going to be getting into a relationship with a single parent, whether it is a single mother or a single father, you have to know that investment and involvement in that child's life is going to be at the forefront most of the time for what that person is looking at and what that person is seeing. And if you are not going to engage in that child's life and you're not going to care or show concern, most likely that parent is going to always place value and emphasis over their child's well-being over a relationship. And that's what I would have fully expected and what we would have gotten from Lorelai. But from the start, Luke was always present in Rory's life. He was always giving her birthday presents. He was attending all of the major life events that were important to her, from graduations to birthday parties. He was going out of his way to always just invest in her and make time for her and make her feel cared and loved. And that was a direct reflection for how he also felt about Lorelai, where he saw both of these Gilmore women and just instantly loved them in different ways, but loved them nonetheless. And he took a greater interest in Rory's life than Christopher, her own biological father, ever did. And I will fully admit that Chris, as a teenage father, that is a hard role to step into when you're not ready for it, when you're not financially prepared for it. But Chris had years and years to involve himself in Rory's life and to be a present father figure, and he never adequately was until it was too late, in the sense that Rory is a grown adult now. So it's cool that you want to invest in her life, but you should have been there more from the start. I do care about you being a teenage father and needing to figure that out for yourself, but you were not invested in your own daughter's life as much as you should have been, and it fell on Luke almost inadvertently to have to fill that role, but he filled it spectacularly. And if I was Lorelai, seeing a man come into my life who loves my daughter that intensely and who is so present and involved in her life, that's appealing, that's attracting. He always showed Lorelai the care and the grace that she was due. He was always just present and there for her, and even when she misstepped, he was always forgiving. He was still present. He always was just loyal and gracious to understanding what she had going on in her life. When Chris wasn't always that. He was sometimes very self-centered. He made it a lot about him, and Luke never did that. Luke put Lorelai at the forefront of their relationship when Chris made it a lot about himself sometimes. So I will absolutely say Luke was the perfect. I mean, I use that word loosely because whoever is perfect, nobody. But Luke was the best choice and the best fit for Lorelai. And I don't necessarily I care, but I don't in this regard that Chris was her biological father. It doesn't make you the right partner for Lorelai. Luke filled that role. He was the man that Lorelai needed in her life. And as the seasons went on and as the revival went on, all I ever saw from him was just constant loyalty and care and compassion and willingness to make a relationship work, even if it meant sacrificing things that he wanted and his own goals and his own dreams. And Chris never did that. It's Luke Danes for the win.
I'm just going to start out by saying nice pun with the going to bat thing, because, Scott Patterson's a minor leaguer before being an actor. Not to mention he played baseball in the first season, in the episode where Chris shows up. So I think that's funny. Yeah. I think what you said there about like the best choice for Lorelai is probably true. Again, this is based on only what we've seen in the show. And maybe like if I were trying to come up with a general profile of someone I think would be perfect for Lorelai, would I create a man like Luke? I don't know. You're right. He's very loyal. He's very attentive. He is very often forgiving. But sometimes I almost feel like he takes that stuff too far and is kind of an enabler of some of Lorelai's worst traits at times. Like he's too accepting, too subservient. He just look at We've Got Magic to Do is a great example. Lorelai notices that he's not doing anything for himself. He's not doing the things that he enjoys, and she has to call him out on it and be like, go camping, go fishing. Those are the things you like to do. You don't have to do everything I like, nor do I expect you to. And he's trying to be a nice guy about it. He's like, I like spending time with you, and I will put up with your crazy friends and their crazy kids and crazy Miss Patty and crazy town stuff because I want to spend time with you. And that's as sweet as that is. He's not maintaining enough of his own individual life and individual personhood to keep that relationship healthy and to keep it from becoming codependent. So I worry that someone like Luke isn't going to be someone who's actually going to push Lorelai to grow. He's going to be someone who's going to let her stagnate a little, which is probably why they don't get married in the 10 years between the end of the show and the revival. They just sort of like fall into this pattern of complacency, and Lorelai's still running her inn, Luke's still running his diner. Neither of them seems to have progressed very much in their individual lives or their lives together. They've made some updates to the house, and that feels like about it. Neither of them seems to have, matured emotionally or kind of gotten past a lot of the emotional blocks that stopped them from getting married in the first place. And the fact that they didn't think to do that work in the 10 intervening years is kind of I'd say it's a red flag, but you stole my red flag last time you were here. So I'm just going to have to like pretend to wave it. It's a little bit troubling to me. Thank you. That Lorelai is just kind of allowed to dictate a lot of the terms in that relationship. He buys the Twickham house for them and then unbuys it and then buys it again. And she's like, well, I don't want to sell this house. I don't want to move because it's all about her. It's all about her life. It's all about her wants. And the reason Luke is so good for her is because he just slots right into exactly, what she needs, in that he lets her push him around a little.
I don't know. I don't think he's pushing her around. I think he's just
No, she's pushing him around.
Like, yeah, but like I don't think he's letting himself be pushed. I think he's just recognizing that this woman is someone whom I love greatly, who means a lot to me in my life. I'm going to listen to her interests, take what she has to say, and if she wants this house, I will get her this house. If this is what she wants her life to be in Stars Hollow, I'm going to try and let her have that, because my life and my happiness falls in line with hers. And we see that in the revival, where he's like, this is all I'm ever going to want. I'm never going to think about leaving. I'm never going to think about going anywhere else, because your life and the time that I spend with you, like, this is it for me. And we've seen other people, we've dated other people. I had to watch you get married, which destroyed me. But she comes back from that wild trip, and he's just, I love that monologue of him just saying, like, you're all I'm ever going to need and want. I don't have to look elsewhere. And I'm sorry that I did in the past. I hated seeing you look elsewhere in the past, because it devastated both of us in maybe ways that we didn't even recognize at the time. But I'm all in on this now, and I'm ready to do this. And Lorelai just recognizes that in him and says, like, I'm not breaking up with you, which is what he thought was happening at that point. But she just says, I think we should get married. He understood and knew Lorelai to her core better than Chris ever did. And I think a lot of their connection stemmed from the fact that were trying somewhat to parent a child together, that you had a child together, but that doesn't mean that you should end up together. Even if you have, like, Emily pushing for it a lot of the time, which was just problematic in its own right. But two people biologically parenting and being responsible for a child together, it doesn't equate to you being good lifelong partners. It just means that you have a human being and a child that you're responsible for, but it doesn't mean that you need to end up together. And so Chris was never right. Luke was. Just come on, Kate.
Have I not said at least twice that I'm only devil's advocating here?
Mm.
Yeah. I got to push you on it, because that's what the premise of this whole episode is. But what you said kind of at the beginning there, like her being all he needs and wants, that's codependency defined, like that's not a healthy dynamic. They need to have separate interests and separate lives, but also not be so separate as to be kind of living in silos almost, which is kind of what happens with April. We see it both in season 6 and the revival as well, when, Lorelai hears that she wants to go to Germany and also do her master's at MIT. And she's like, where's the money for all this coming? Like, I can chip in. And he's like, no, she's my daughter. I'll take care of it. He was always very much keeping April a bit at an arm's length from Lorelai as well, despite the fact that Lorelai was ready to help him kind of co-parent April a little bit and be a presence in April's life. We see that she wants that really badly in season 6. But Luke was too emotionally immature to be able to have both things at once, to have his relationship with his daughter and his fiance. And ultimately it ended his relationship with Lorelai. He says on their first date, I am in, I am all in. It's obviously one of the most iconic lines from the whole show, and Scott Patterson built his entire podcast around it. They're coming up on Written in the Stars soon, which is great. So juicy. We'll finally get to the episode where the podcast name comes from. We've been waiting all these years. So he says that, and then within a few episodes, he's already out because he can't even handle the conflict and the history that exists with Lorelai and Christopher. There's a lot of complex emotions there that, one self-help book isn't enough to help him work through. And from what we see, he doesn't really continue to do some of that work that's required. And it causes him to block her out and keep a major secret from her for 2 months. He doesn't tell her about April's existence. And again, huge red flag that he can't even tell the woman that he wants to spend his life with that he has a daughter. This is a life-changing major thing that he neglects to share. right after he fucking lectured. Sorry. My language has already gotten out of
We're here
control.
for it. This is what we're here for.
This is a good sign. Don't take us down, YouTube. He just lectured her about Christopher and about keeping secrets from her when Chris calls and she shuts off the answering machine just before Thanksgiving. He's like, we have to tell each other everything. And, she says, you can't run to your clubhouse every time we have a fight. We're going to be married soon. And, all of this had just happened. And then all of a sudden he keeps an even bigger secret from Lorelai that completely changes the entire game of their relationship and their lives moving forward. And he's like, yeah, I can't even tell the person I love most in this world my biggest news ever. So I don't love that. Again, it's a fictional show and it's entirely played for drama, which is kind of infuriating. But again, it goes back to him just being too emotionally immature sometimes to handle their conflicts and to handle maintaining individuation from her. And there's something to be said for simple wants and needs, and he doesn't need to have massive ambitions to have a franchise of Luke's Diner or to, be a big New York restaurateur or something. But your happiness should never be tied exclusively to the happiness of another. And that's kind of the territory he was falling into with Lorelai. It was just everything was about her. Everything was for her. And he just never was able to move beyond some of his own traumas and to do things for himself. It's nice that he's selfless. I don't want to knock the guy for being thoughtful and generous and attentive, obviously. But again, not psychologically healthy to tie your happiness to that of someone else is not enough to sustain a relationship. Look at how many times they fell apart or almost fell apart. And now that they're married, if they can't continue to work past this, like they're 50, and they still have not managed to really work through that blockage, it seems. I'm hoping that they finally find a way to mature in their 50s. If we get another revival, we'll find out. But and they couldn't even have a proper conversation about surrogacy. Luke kept thinking that he had to have sex with these women. They're just so still immature, and their communication with each other just lacks in so many areas. She doesn't tell him that she continues on in therapy, and he doesn't express his concerns to her. He doesn't tell her about meeting with Emily for the real estate showings. Like, they just, even after all of those years, they still keep things from each other, and they shouldn't be doing that many years into their relationship.
Okay, but I'm going to start off saying this. I think about where Luke is in his life and just where any person would be at in their life, just having to be confronted with, I have a woman who I had relations with, who I was sexually active with over a decade ago now, and I'm getting hit with this knowledge that I have a preteen teenage daughter that my partner at that time, not only, she obviously never disclosed the pregnancy, never disclosed the fact that she decided to keep the child and give birth to this child. And then over all of the intervening years until we actually meet and see April, she never disclosed to Luke that, oh, by the way, you are the father. So he's getting hit with just this overnight realization, I have a child who I was never told about. How is anybody supposed to process that normally or healthily? There's going to be just emotional volatility that's coming to the forefront where it's just I want to be there for my kid and I want to support them. And I think we see Luke trying to do that right off the bat, but he's also needing to now contend with the fact that the mother of my child never told me about my child. How am I supposed to rationalize 12 or 13 years of just never having this knowledge, on top of the fact that I am trying to efficiently and effectively establish a relationship with a woman whom I've also loved for years, and it's finally going well for me, and now I have to introduce April into the mix. I understand how that can be hard for Luke to do, and how he's just going to be like, I don't know what to say. I don't know how to broach this. What do I say? Like my ex-partner kept a child from me, but by the way, like here's my daughter. Lorelai was always very transparent with Rory and having Luke be a part of Rory's life, but I can understand why this is going to be more difficult for Luke to do because he's just now coming to know of the existence of his own daughter and trying to get to know her better and establish that relationship while again working on his current romantic relationship with Lorelai. That is a lot and that is chaotic and that is hard for anybody to have to like broach all of those things at once and to think, how do I tell my partner about this? I will agree that like he should have been more forthcoming and transparent and found a way to communicate that sooner than he did, but I can't fault him for the difficulty of needing to have that conversation and trying to figure out how I'm going to broach that, especially when April is not she's a young adult at this point, so she's already very autonomous, very knowledgeable. Um she's going to have her own thoughts and ideals about, you know, how do I see, like, do I want Luke to be a part of my life as a father figure? Do I want a woman that he's dating to potentially be a part of my life as like a maternal figure when my biological mother is already filling that role for me? There was, I think, just a lot that was contentious and on the table for Luke that he was going to have to work through and figure out how he wanted to approach. So I can't fault him for needing a couple weeks to just be like, I don't know what to do here. And I think that's a normal human response. And I'm glad I saw that from him because it is troubling and it is hard to have to figure out what you're going to do. So the fact that he was struggling, I think, is just a normal human response because anybody in that situation would be.
Yeah, and I don't want to get too into the weeds on Anna and April because we will talk about them at a later date as well, and Luke as a dad. But just in terms of his relationship with Lorelai and how it impacted things, you're about to legally tie yourself to this woman and spend your life with her. You need to trust her implicitly. You just had an ultimatum with her essentially about like, we need to tell each other everything. And yes, while it was emotionally difficult for him to process, he also just assumed that he had to do that on his own when he could have included Lorelai in that much sooner and come to her for wisdom and for guidance because she has a daughter and could offer some advice or some perspective on it that a guy like Luke was not likely to find within himself immediately. It was his inability to fully bring Lorelai into his life and to merge with her and to trust that their relationship would survive that ultimately broke them up. And, of course, it's going to take a while to process something like that. But if your relationship can't withstand it, you need to know that as well. And so he needed to like buck up a little bit and be like, either our relationship is going to survive this or it's not, because the reality remains the same that I now have a daughter and it's going to change this dynamic. So I have to be forthcoming about this information because one, I need support and help and someone to help me contend with this emotionally. And, Lorelai is a part of my life. Lorelai and I are an item, a unit. We need to move forward together as a unit. I can't make decisions like this without her now because that's what I signed up for in getting into a marriage with her. So, that's only one like facet of their communication problems. But I would like to talk a little more about Chris. We have been focusing a little too much maybe on Luke. So why don't we switch to okay, what is there anything else about Chris that that really troubles you when it comes to how healthy their relationship was? Like what specifics can we dig into here?
A lack of commitment across the board. Like he always says that he's going to be there for Lorelai and that he wants to be there for Rory, and he makes an effort and he tries for days, if not maybe a couple of weeks, and then he takes off again and he's just gone and not present. And I understand needing a career path and needing to be financially stable, but you should not be trying to reinsert yourself into Lorelai's life as a partner if you are not actively ready to commit and be there full time. And it's not, it doesn't even just happen once, it happens multiple times where he tries to reinsert himself into Lorelai's life only to flake out again weeks or months down the line when a job opportunity presents itself and he wants to take it. And he assures Rory that, I think in season 1 when he rolls back up in the Stars Hollow and is doing what are wonderful things like, let me buy you this dictionary that you love. Like, I promise I'm going to be more active. I want to come to your Chilton debates and I want to see, what school is going like for you and be present in those moments. And I applaud him for that, but it never lasts long. And the second that he gets an opportunity that is good for him, he just makes it about him. And he says, well, I need to take this and I need to do this because this is going to be beneficial for me. So even if it means piecing out on my daughter again and piecing out on my daughter's on the mother of my child, like, and just not actively being a part of their life anymore, that's what I need to do because that's what's best for me. He'd never, like, I'm not even saying that he needs to put Lorelai first, but that's your kid. Like, that's your child. You need to be actively just putting her at the forefront and being supportive and there for her. And when you assure her that you're going to be, and then your behavior changes and you immediately negate that and you choose something for yourself that puts her second and you first, like, that hurts Rory. And I will constantly flag all the time all of those instances where Chris does something that affects Rory and makes her question, like, does my dad even really want to be a part of my life? Because he says he wants to be here, but his actions don't back that up all the time.
Yeah, Chris is an interesting one because he's almost more of a plot device than a character at times, where he's brought in and out at opportune or inopportune moments to cause particular dramas or to solve particular problems. Like when he's brought in to be an angel investor when Rory's fighting with the grandparents in season 6. We hadn't seen him since Wedding Bell Blues, and they were really on the outs with him for a long time. And then all of a sudden he shows up to solve the problem of money, which again goes to the depictions of money on the show being a little unrealistic, because what are the odds of the timing of the death of his grandfather and all that money coming into his hands? But I think that Chris he has a lot in common with Lorelai. His parents are very similar to Emily and Richard. He had very similar expectations put on him that she did. And when they got pregnant, Lorelai was the one who decided to take sole responsibility and tell Christopher to beg off. She didn't want anyone being responsible for her or controlling her anymore. She wanted to do this on her own terms, and that meant cutting out not only Emily and Richard, but also Christopher. And so, like, imagine how that would feel when you're 17 and you're ready to step up and be like, the plan your parents have for us doesn't actually sound so bad. Like, I could totally get a job and we could get married and we can raise the baby. He offered to do that. He was the one who wanted to go through with that plan and, have the nuclear family and work it out and at least make a try at it. Whereas Lorelai was like, no, it's me and Rory against the world. And she was like that with not only him, but everyone. And when he went off to kind of do his own thing around the college years, that's pretty typical of anyone, nonetheless, someone with a kid. And so I can't necessarily fault him for trying to make his own way in the world, especially when his parents suck as much as Lorelai's. And I think he does go on a journey and he has his own arc, but we don't see it. We only ever see things through the lens of the Gilmore Girls. So our point of view is skewed away from him because Lorelai doesn't trust him and Rory has some, rightful abandonment issues. And so I think that there's a lot to Christopher that actually isn't so bad, but it's filtered through a particular perspective or bias that we have towards Lorelai and Rory, who are sometimes passive aggressive or rejecting or rude to him as well. Like Rory has to go to him and be like, I don't want you talking to mom. That's not her place to be like, you can't talk to my mother. You can't maintain a friendship or a relationship with my mother, like no matter how long you guys have been friends before my existence. You know, there's moments where the Gilmore Girls aren't great to him either. And it's a tough decision for him when he has to leave Lorelai and his first daughter to be with his new girlfriend and his new daughter, because he's like, I finally have a chance to be a part of a family. You never let me have that. And so, you know, between his upbringing and his constant rejection by them, I don't necessarily blame him for being kind of distant. But whenever he is around, you know, like he does try. They talk to him fairly regularly. They see him on holidays, even though he lives on the opposite coast. He shows up sometimes for things for Rory that are relatively small, like when he shows up for the debate. And even in season 6, when Rory has that like Voices of Young Journalism or whatever it's called panel, he does show up, and he's also generous with his money when he has it, and sometimes even when he doesn't. Like you mentioned, his willingness to buy the Oxford Dictionary, which is like a $400 book. And, you know, he was willing to put that on credit and pay it off to make his daughter happy. You know, I think he tried, but was just kind of constantly thwarted by Lorelai or by the universe or by someone. And all of his efforts were rebuffed. So, like, sometimes I have some pity for him, but he was also one of Lorelai's most persistent suitors as well. You know, they've known each other most of their lives. And he, you know, he tried multiple times to get Lorelai to agree to be with him. And by season 7, he's like, I'll wait for you until I'm 80. You're it for me. And he convinces her to get married in Paris, which that's a whole other thing we're probably not going to be able to talk about at the moment. But, you know, he wants to marry her, and he ultimately does want to commit. But by the time they're in a relationship and they're trying to work it through, he can see that she's not emotionally available to him all the time, and she's keeping secrets from him. And, you know, there's a lot of baggage in Stars Hollow. She's not willing to move out of Stars Hollow, and she's not willing to cut off her relations with Luke, or at least not until their marriage almost falls apart. And even then, she can't do it. And he's not entirely wrong to be sort of dubious of that relationship. So I can have some more sympathy for Christopher sometimes when I go back and think about all the like stuff he endured in his childhood that's very similar to Lorelai, and how they're kind of at very similar places. And the only reason Lorelai is maybe any better off or more mature than him is because she was so firm on being independent and not needing him that she was forced to learn how to be a mother. And even then, she wasn't a perfect mother. She might have had a very different experience of motherhood if she had let people help her. So we might have to put a little bit of the blame on Lorelai for being a little too insular with Rory and not letting anyone into her life. She was too untrusting sometimes.
I mean, I think she had a right to be, though. That's your kid, you know? And you have a father figure who is not as present as he should be. And I don't dismiss your argument of Lorelai pushing him away, because Lorelai did make it, you know, about, like, it was the Rory and Lorelai show. And it always has been. But Chris did not make enough of an effort to be present in his daughter's life as he could have been. And Luke was there more.
Luke wasn't really involved in like the parenting of Rory, though. Like, he was kind of there for, like, you know, he made her a coffee cake for his birthday. And while that was thoughtful, that, you know, it's not necessarily on the same level that, say, Lorelai got involved with April or Gigi, you know?
Who showed up to Rory's high school graduation and who was absent?
Yes, I appreciate that one. But sometimes there are things you can't get out of. And, you know, they had extra tickets when they found out that he couldn't go.
Nope, your kid graduates high school once. I'm sorry, not sorry. You need to be there. You want to say that you care about your daughter and you want to be an active part of your life, but you can't make her high school graduation? Get out of here with that nonsense.
You know what? Again, I think this is a writing thing where either David Sutcliffe wasn't available or because again, most people, like, this is so weird, but most people don't get like 6 tickets to their high school graduation. They get like 4. And so the fact that Suki and Jackson were there along with Luke makes me think that like the writers did it that way and excluded Chris, not because like if Chris were a real person, he probably would have tried to be there. He came for the Deb ball. He came for one of her debates at Chilton because he was in the area. He lives in Boston now. He is local. So unless there's something he literally could not get out of, if Chris were a real person, he would have been there. But I think they wanted to have Suki and Jackson there so that they could do the in thing. And I think they wanted Luke there because of the Nicole thing. And so I think it was more just like, okay, we need these interactions between these characters, and this is like the best way to make it happen because we only have so much time or so much to work with here. And, you know, David Sutcliffe is working on Friends or what? No, actually, it would have been before that, I think. But David Sutcliffe was on Friends. Mm-hmm. So, you know, there could be, I always like to look at the meta reasons that things might have happened. I think it was a writing decision to have a particular group there that excluded Chris. But again, like I said, Chris is used only when they want drama or something to be miraculously fixed, like in season 6. And I think it does some disservice to the character because I actually think that like there are some moments where he really comes through and is a pretty decent dad to Rory, but he was just never given much of a chance, and he was never pushed to grow or to fill that role by anyone, including Lorelai. And so I can totally understand why not being allowed to, or forced to even, to really be there for Rory was sort of almost a license for him to kind of remain immature longer. I think sometimes there are things in our lives that unfortunately force us to grow up maybe too fast, and people didn't make him grow up fast enough. Mm-hmm. There was something in his background with his parenting and his privilege that allowed him to drag out his adolescence maybe a little too long, and it's unfortunate. And it didn't make him the best father figure, but you know, Lorelai was just like, well, the door is open, except slam. Like,
I don't know. I don't think she was ever really slamming it though. I think she was genuine with saying that the door to Chris is open. He didn't walk through it as much as he could have.
It's hard to say.
And it affects Rory because you could tell she wants her father there. In season 1, she's so happy to see him there. She's so happy to think like, oh, you know, Mom, is he actually going to maybe stick around this time? And Lorelai has to counsel her and say like, I don't know, honey, don't get your hopes up too high. That's so like, it's not uncommon within the world, but it's so saddening to me to have to just again watch on even a fictional television show a parent say like, I don't know if your other parent is going to stick around, like I can't promise you that. That's just heartbreaking.
But look at Rory's reaction to that. Like, she is thrilled that he is there, and that to me speaks of a good relationship between them. You know, maybe he's not in town a lot, but it seems like they talk fairly regularly and have a decent rapport with each other. And she's glad to have him around, and she does kind of yearn for that nuclear family thing, because anytime a parent is missing, whether they're like present and neglectful or whether their parents are divorced or whatever, there is going to be some sort of psychological impact to that. And Rory's obviously reacting to that. But I think maybe Lorelai's attitude is more at play than either of them give credit for. Like, Lorelai thinks she's being the bigger person by being like, the door is always open for you, but also putting him down sometimes to other people and just being like, he's flaky and he's unreliable and he is immature. Like remembering him as he was when he was 16 and or earlier, and not maybe giving him more credit. And it keeps him from trying harder or more to build the relationship that he really wants to have with Rory. So it's a really complicated thing, and they don't show us enough of it. They bring us into these girls' lives when a lot of the stuff has already happened and is behind them, and they don't give us a ton of context. And so it's really hard to determine, but I do think that their history and their chemistry made them a great conceptual match for each other. But, you know, sometimes good on paper isn't the person who's right for you in reality. And, you know, Luke isn't perfect on paper either, but they seem to find some sort of lifestyle that works for them together. And, you know, if they make each other happy and they're not totally unhealthy, then, you know, realistically, I'm Team Luke. I just had to fight for the other side on this one because nobody's really going to seriously make the argument that Christopher is the right man.
I see your mug, and I will say round 2 of round 2 within this particular episode is coming. But grab your popcorn, folks, if you think this is contentious enough already.
This was just the appetizer, the amuse-bouche to the feast of argumentation that is about to follow.
Look, Luke was always so much more present in Lorelai's life and Rory's life. And look at the response that Emily and Richard have to Luke as opposed to the response they have to Chris. Emily constantly pushes for Chris to be a part of Lorelai's life because it's like, oh, you know, you're the father of her child. Like, you know, you should be together. That's not a good enough reason. But even from season 1, Lorelai is just, even when she's unsure of her chemistry and the nature of what her relationship with Luke could be, her own mother is realizing, like, I see it.
She sees she sees the sort of like fireworks between them, but neither of them was willing to cop to that. And they let it hang for a long, long time. And she reaches for Christopher before she reaches for Luke, who's like right there. She's probably worried about complicating things with Luke and complicating things within the town without being totally sure that it was the right path to take. But, you know, speaking of Emily and Richard and their responses to them, you know, they were so against Luke and his type of person in general, like not him specifically, but like anyone like him, that they were willing to interfere. And so part of me almost thinks that Lorelai likes Luke because he is so far removed from her upbringing in Hartford, and because her parents don't like him, he's just everything opposite to what she ran away from, and so she runs toward that. And, you know, again, that's not enough to sustain a healthy relationship. And his stability, I think, attracts her, and her passion and fire and her just bubbly personality kind of attracts him. But and while they sort of lack those things in themselves, you should never look for those things in another person. It's good to be complementary and to have like skill sets that work well together, but you should never need to be like completed by another person. And sometimes I feel like that was the dynamic with Luke and Lorelai, where like they were looking too much outside themselves for something they didn't have without looking inside first.
No, I'm gonna say I disagree. It took them years to really figure out their chemistry and why they were good and equitable partners for one another. I don't fault them for the time that it took, and I'm glad they took that time. I feel like sometimes Lorelai and Chris really rushed into even getting, like, when they got married in Paris, you know, I would flag them for that too, because one, you're leaving Rory out of it, which is just a complete just nightmare of a situation. She should have been involved. But I feel like there was even a misstep and a misguided sense in them there, where it's just like, this is the ending that we should have always had, so let's just finally have it, because we have it. Like, I just, again, like, you went off with Sherry, had Gigi, but like you were always like it for me from the start. So this is just what our life should have been. So let's just make it happen now. I guess, you know, even though it's like later on in life, at least we're doing what our parents would have wanted and expected for us. Everything about it was so wrong. And that's why I feel like the divorce happened almost immediately afterwards, too, when they're just like, what are we doing? We're rushing into something that we're broaching again for the wrong reasons. We're really not compatible or the right people for one another. And I'm sure that they realize that they're always able to maintain a friendship and a really strong bond and genuine love for one another, but not a love that stems from you're my life partner and the person that I want to spend the rest of my life with. So they always approached their relationship with one another for immature and naive reasons, which I can't necessarily fault them for because both of these characters had a lot of growing up to do as the series progressed. And even when they're in their 30s, I still see a lot of immaturity and naivety from them in terms of just like, what are you doing? Like, do you still not realize how wrong or incorrect that is? And that you're broaching these relationships from a standpoint that is not healthy. But it was why it never worked out and why, despite them always seeing other people, despite Max, despite um, Nicole, these two individuals always came back to one another because they knew at the end of the day, like there was just, you're it for me. And sometimes it just takes time to realize that, but I don't fault them for it. Sometimes you have to go on that journey.
Yeah, Chris and Lorelai took a long time to get to where they got to as well, because when they're having that conversation in Paris, she's like, we've only been dating a few months. And he's like, try 25 years, They know each other really well by that point, and they have so much history that it was fast in terms of like maybe that particular situation. But, it's not like they just met on Tinder 4 months before and decided to get married. So I think they had a basis for that marriage. And yeah, I agree. Like Rory should not have been left out of that. There were a lot of things wrong with it. I think ultimately it fell apart because two main reasons. One, they didn't communicate all that well. They didn't fight very well specifically. Christopher, again, was just a little too immature and reactive when it came to Luke because of the baggage and, how everyone in town reacted to the whole thing. And I think maybe the other reason that potentially there was something there was all the expectation heaped on it. It was put upon them from the time that they were teenagers that this is the right thing to do. And so they always rebelled against that idea because they didn't want it to be true. And, I think relationships come down a lot to choice and to work and to commitment. And, I think if things had been different for them and they had realized that, instead of just being like, no, I got to wait for this fairy tale or something else, there might have been a different outcome for them where they actually learned to mature and grow and communicate and not fight and run. So it's unfortunate that they were both kind of too immature to be able to do that, which ultimately was the reason for the breakup because of what happened when Richard had his heart attack. So yeah, and I think that the pressure on them from the beginning just put too much on the idea of that perfect family and Lorelai marrying of the right stock. And so she went so far in the other direction and she wanted something so different because of that she couldn't accept Christopher in all of his Christopher-ness. And he couldn't accept that she had a complicated past with Luke and couldn't move beyond the emotions in that. But ding ding, I feel like we have to call this one.
Yeah, I think we need to I want us to move on to our next pairing.
Yeah. For the record, I do prefer Luke to Chris, but for the sake of this episode, it's fun to dig into it a little more and to kind of go further back into these character psyches and figure out kind of what's going on underneath everything and see if there's any redeeming qualities to be found in Chris. So,
but that is going to wrap up part 1 of this episode in terms of the Chris versus Luke debate. So if you're watching us and you have thoughts on who you think should win this argument, who you think was the right man for Lorelai, weigh in, drop us a comment. We're excited to see what you guys think too. But we are going to move on now to what I think is like the championship round of Battle of the Boyfriends, and one that we're actually not even playing devil's advocate on. This is a debate that's about to go down where you
If anyone's just listening to this and didn't watch the screen, I just held up my Team Logan mug and Laura just couldn't handle it.
Yeah. So this next debate is going to be on the right man for Rory, and we've boiled it down to, if you watched last week, we eliminated some of Rory's early men. We got rid of Dean.
Rightly so. Not right for her at all.
Yep. So now this is going to be a Jess versus Logan debate. And we're not devil's advocating here. Kate is firmly in the Team Logan camp, and I am firmly in the Team Jess camp. So we're about to fight this out for realsies.
The time has come. This is the meat and potatoes of Friday night dinner this week.
Yeah.
So this is what we've been building up to.
Yeah. Just you'll be okay, Kate.
I know I will, because I'm going to win. So let's get Jess out of the way and lead us off with the wrong man for Rory.
What? What did you say?
You heard me. But you heard me.
No, I didn't. I'm just gonna calm myself down with like some coffee so I can then carry your
coffee, the most calming beverage.
Mm-hmm. I'm gonna go on the attack and the offensive first.
Of course,
because I am Team Jess, but I'm gonna attack Logan. What a pretentious, arrogant, self-centered, privileged, right, like waspy douchebag.
Butt-face miscreant.
This individual is abhorrent for all of the reasons I just said. He is privileged. He falls back on mommy and daddy. He doesn't know how to treat a woman properly. He cheats on Rory. And I know we're going to talk about that too, because I know you think it wasn't cheating. In my mind, it was. But he sleeps with his sister's entire bridal party.
Not the one who was in Biarritz, though.
Which just devastates Rory. You want to say there's a lack of miscommunication. Maybe it still just is not okay behavior. He is constantly pushing Rory into situations that she's not ready for. He's ignorant and insincere and just uncaring about her career. And when she's having her own struggles, he makes it so much about him all of the time. And I'm attacking him first and foremost, and I will defend Jess, but I feel like I needed to go on the offensive first and just illustrate that Logan is absolutely terrible human, I will say he's a terrible human being, not right for Rory, and just way too self-centered, and someone who was never going to fit into her life, and Rory can do so much better.
I think the fandom extrapolates a little too much from like a few little moments, like the one look through the window, sort of a compatibility that probably doesn't exist. And they do so because of the belief that, Logan is her Christopher and Jess is her Luke, which we're going to touch on again in a couple of weeks when we talk about the differences between Lorelai and Rory and why that argument is kind of bunk. At least if you want good characters, right? So I think that the best of Jess is left off screen, and that doesn't give me any real confidence that the writers believe in him as a good partner for Rory either, because, if you look at the revival, they could have done a lot of things differently to give us more time with Jess and Rory, but he comes back into town for Liz and TJ, and he spends most of it hanging out with Luke and helping Luke through his problems. And he says like one thing to Rory, which is about writing a book, and he says she's still a contender, but that's like really all we get with them. And that doesn't give me any hope that there's anything there between those characters. It's been 10 years since they saw each other last. And his parents live in Stars Hollow. His uncle lives there. His uncle is dating her mom. They've had all of these years of running into each other where we don't know what their relationship status was, but they always had that opportunity to revisit that connection, and they never did. They seem like they're good friends and they trust each other, but there seems to have been no move on either part to make anything of this. And so to assume that they're in a place to be anything more than friends right now when Rory's about to give birth to somebody else's child, like, a lot of people say this is the right person, wrong time, but I don't think that her being on the cusp of having a child with another guy is exactly the right time. And I think that he's, he's a good dude for the most part, but I have absolutely no hard evidence that they have anything in common in their 30s, that they want the same things out of life, that he's ready to get married and be a parent to another person's child, that he wants kids at all, that he's willing to move out of Philadelphia and to leave Truncheon to move back to Stars Hollow, which, to him is basically hell, to fill a fatherly role for Rory's baby's dad. I just don't think that he has the same personality or capabilities that Luke had to be sort of a stable figure for Rory's kid. He's just not the same person that Luke is. There's no way he's going to fill that same role. And I think that, compatibility and marriage and lifelong partnership is based on a lot more than just like, hey, we really used to like to kiss each other when we were teenagers. I've seen absolutely no evidence that they're actually good for each other at this point in their lives. Rory is way too much of a mess, and she's way too emotionally involved in Logan. And like, Rory has chosen Logan over everything and everyone for years. She chose him over Marty, she chose him over Paul, and she chose him over Jess at least twice. She had the opportunity to rekindle things with Jess, and she never did, because that's not the role that he fills for her anymore. She turned him down at the end of season 4. She turned him down at the end of season 6. And by the revival, we have absolutely zero evidence that they're still interested in each other at all, except for that one look through the window where it's just like, what might have been? Like, she's so great, but he has no idea that she's currently carrying Logan's child and how complicated that's going to make everything. And, she has a whole history with Logan, and we'll get to that. But I think the best thing in this situation, again, I reiterate, Rory is not Lorelai, and Christopher and Logan are not the same either. So just because Christopher wasn't the right guy for Lorelai doesn't mean that Logan is not the right guy for Rory. And I think that, they're in their mid-30s. They have more of their stuff together than Lorelai and Christopher did. They've spent more years in a relationship. They've lived together. They almost got married of their own accord, even though they were too young and wanted different things at the time. But they found their way back to each other and are willing to risk their other relationships to be with each other. And I think there's a lot more love and a lot more commitment to that relationship than there are to like either of their individual partners. And now that they're having a kid, I find it hard to believe that Logan's going to want to go through with the dynastic plan. And so I think the best thing for everyone would be for him to come clean and to just be with Rory, because I think it's clear that they really are so connected to each other that they have to like stop putting the other people in their lives through this BS and just actually like give this a college try, because it's clear how much they still care about each other. And, Logan is constantly the person that she's going to for emotional support right now. It's not Jess. Jess just shows up and plays like, a mentor figure role and then is like hardly there again. So we'll keep going into this, obviously, but that's, I guess, my opening statement. And I'm just going to do one more thing before you get into your next thing. You kind of started out with, a laundry list of Logan's perceived flaws, but I would like to counter by saying that Rory is basically all of those things too. And so they're like, water finds its own level.
You're not wrong.
She's also privileged and pompous and self-centered and all kinds of other things. She also cheats.
Yes.
Yeah, we will have an entire episode on cheating, and I will go into my entire philosophy on cheating as well. So, and we'll obviously touch on it here, but I just wanted to sort of lead off with a bit of a, you know, I don't have anything specifically against Jess at this point in the story. He seems like a nice enough guy who probably isn't out being a douche to people, but that doesn't mean that he and Rory are compatible. Like, to actually live together and communicate and raise a child, especially when that child is not yours, I don't buy it. I don't see it. The writers did nothing to make me believe in that, or that they wanted that to be the outcome. Without another season and more development and more reconnection between those characters at this adult place in their life, I can't get on board.
Mm-hmm. You good?
No. But I've been talking for a while, so it's your turn.
Here we go. Yes, we have talked about the fact that Rory, and I will fully admit, is a very flawed individual. Missteps in a lot of the ways that Logan does. Cheats, is not a good partner. And we've had this conversation before, and I stand by this statement that, to an extent, I don't believe that Rory and Lorelai ever deserved men, because they treated the men in their lives a lot of the time that they had really atrociously. And I'm all for, like, women's rights and a feminist perspective, and I'm glad that Amy brought that into the picture as much as she did, and we'll talk about that too. But I will absolutely call Lorelai and Rory out on all of the instances of them not treating the partners and the men in their lives they had well. I mean, Marty, like, that man deserves so much better, but that's neither here nor there. So yes, I will fully agree that Rory misstepped in a lot of the same ways that Logan did. But one of the things that just sat with me instantly from what you said is just, if Rory and Logan were meant to be together, why aren't they?
No, I meant Rory and Jess are not together. Like,
okay,
they had all that time to get together and they never did. Whereas Rory runs into Logan in Hamburg and suddenly they're cheating on the partners with each other. Like, there was just automatically that reconnection of that fire was still there for them all these years later. And it's a really bad time. And they're both kind of crappy people for, going behind their partners' backs. But I think it's a testament to the fact that, like, there's something that they're not getting from their other relationships that they find in each other. And she doesn't seem to have that same connection with Jess anymore.
If you're not getting something from your partner, you need to communicate that to your partner before you go and cheat. It's wrong on both parties for them to do that. And for you to then get together and think like, oh, this is the person that I'm always supposed to be with, but I'm seeking, like, he's seeking out Honor and she is seeking out Marty or Jess, or trying to, like, have some weird I know it was just the writing and wanting to bring Jared Padalecki back into the revival, but, like, having a weird conversation in the supermarket with Dean about, like, how's your life going? How's Scranton and all of your kids? And, like, okay, you do you, buddy. Like, I get wanting to bring back everyone into the picture, but, like, these two people, if they were ever meant to be together, should have already been together. And I get sometimes needing time to figure that out, but just the fact that they were, over the course of all of the years that they had together and all of the turmoil and all of the fights and the breakups and then the getting back together instances that they had, that they were never able to, like, make it work. And then we're going to talk about, like, the graduation proposal too, and just, like, the ultimatum and all of that stuff, because, like, I will all day every day just flag Logan on that play. That is just horrendous to me, to offer Rory that ultimatum. If you want to be with this person, you have a really weird way of showing it. You have a very unhealthy way of showing it. You offer her ultimatums, you propose to her, and then when she says that she's not ready to be married to you because she wants to pursue a career path, and you say, well, it's now or never, but I still really care about you, but it's still now or never. Get the out of my face with that. I'm sorry. That makes me so mad all the time, where you can't claim to care about a person and want to be a part of their life, but if they're not at the same juncture of the relationship that you're at, and they need more time with you to grow closer to you, to feel comfortable entering into a marriage, but also because their career is important to them and they want to be able to pursue that too, and they're willing to, like, still work with you to make you involved in all of those things and a part of their life as well, and you're so dismissive of that, and you're going to say, like, it's now or never, come and live the life that I want you to live with me, or don't be a part of my life at all, fuck off.
See, that's the thing about that proposal, is that Amy didn't write season 7, and she didn't watch it either when she went into the revival. She got, I think, from what I've heard, I mean, this is probably conjecture or whatever, like, word on the street, she didn't even bother to watch what the other writers did with these characters. And so I think she really did Logan a disservice in the revival by backtracking him so much and, like, removing his backbone that he grew in season 7 to be like, screw my family, screw the dynastic plan. That's not what I want. I want Rory. I respect her. I admire her. I want to marry her and go out and forge a life for ourselves in a land of opportunity. And I think we may have touched on this when we talked about the proposal, but I think it was kind of a BS situation to put Rory in the first place when it comes to, like, I really, really hate the idea that a woman can't have a career and a partner. I think that's a false dichotomy. I think that Logan was ready to move forward in a relationship with a woman that he loved in, you know, a place where Rory could get a great job and she could be on the forefront of digital journalism. She just held so tightly to this idea of what she thought she deserved in New York that she wasn't willing to bend or sacrifice anything at all. And I get that she's early in her career and all of that, but she does kind of a 180 where she's like, yeah, I could totally see being married to you. And, you know, a couple of weeks ago, I was really freaked out about what my life was going to look like. And now you're offering me, you know, something of a path, and suddenly I'm too scared to take it. You know, it felt disingenuous when it happened, and I think that's part of the reason people react so negatively to that proposal and that ultimatum. Is it feels like the characters are doing something weird, because I think the writers wanted to have it be like Rory chooses her career over a man because that's the feminist thing to do, when in reality, like, that's not, again, false dichotomy. You can have both. Like, why does it have to be either or?
But that's what Logan told her to do. At the hay bale maze, Logan, when she, like, and she was just having this whole internal debate of, like, do I take the fellowship? Do I go to work for the Projo? And she's, like, just conflicted on and making pro-con lists about what she wants to do. And Logan very clearly tells her at the hay bale maze, don't factor me into your life. Just don't. And, like, that's verbatim. Don't factor me into your life. Do what is going to be right for you. Make the decisions that you're going to make. Pursue what you want to pursue. I'm going to pursue what I want to pursue. And then when we both have the lives and the livelihood that we want to have, then like, and that's even weird to me too, where he's like, then maybe I'll factor you in. But don't factor me in right now. You go do you. And so she goes and she does it. And
that's why I'm saying it feels wrong.
But that's why, like, it's
character inconsistency,
where your boyfriend is just telling you, go live your life and pursue the career that you want to pursue and make it about you and do what's going to make you happy and find your passion. And then she does it. And then he's like, okay, well, now I want you to factor me in. And she's like, well, hang on. You told me that I should make this about me and the pursuit of my hopes and my dreams and my goals, which I went and did. And now all of a sudden you're ready to factor me in, and you expect me to just, like, leap and dive in blindly and give up everything that I've been pursuing and hoping for because now you're ready. It contradicts exactly what he told her to do. He said, make it about you, go do what you want to. And now that he's like, I want you to marry me, now or never. And if you're not going to marry me, then this relationship ends.
But that's what I'm saying. The writers wrote the characters inconsistently because they were trying to force the choice, which, like, it was a bad structure is what I'm trying to say. Like, the writing was trying to make it so that Rory would choose career over a man because that was, like, the fashionable thing at the time. And it was, again, it went against Logan's character from what we had seen of him. But I also think that, like, Logan never said that he wanted Rory to be a little housewife and to just do everything that he wanted and kowtow entirely to his career. Rory could probably still have gone on that tour with Barack and still been engaged to him, and they could have had a long engagement. He was always supportive of her.
No, because he was just like, come to Palo Alto with me. I'm sure you can find a job in Silicon Valley.
Yeah,
so
she could have.
She can't go. No, but she can't go on the Obama tour and on the campaign trail if he's like, I want you to move to California right now.
Well, she could have like moved with him and then gone from there. But like, he never said that she had to give up a career. And the thing is, the hay bale maze happened before the Rest and Fellowship decline came in. So he knew how much she wanted the New York Times. And when that didn't happen and suddenly she had nothing on the horizon was when he was like, I love you and I want to build a future with you. And I think we can do it here. I have a great opportunity. There's a lot of opportunity for you in this area as well. You can work on your career. You can build up some like entry level credentials and you can use that to build. They didn't have to live in Palo Alto forever, you know. Obviously Logan eventually moved back to London. Like, you don't have to stay there forever. But Rory just assumed she was like the best journalist ever and that she automatically deserved to work in New York. And so she let her selfish desires ruin her relationship, and she was broken by it, and so was Logan. And I think part of the reason that Logan and Rory kind of falter in the revival is that they're both a little like shell-shocked by that experience, especially Logan, where he's like, I already did this and you crushed me. And so, you know, I have this other thing going on and my family has expectations of me, and I'm not going to put myself out there for you if you're not going to reciprocate and you're not going to be there for me. And so that's why you see this weird push-pull between them, because like he was ready to build a life with her. I think they were still too young to get married, frankly. But I also think, like I said, that there were structural problems with the end of season 7 and the writing and the character inconsistencies that just like, it felt weird and it felt wrong. I don't think it was necessarily like Logan is a jerk because of it. I think it's because the writing was bad. But I see where they are now and how their lives have gone since then. And I'm like, imagine where Rory might be if she had taken him up on this. If she had actually worked her way up from the bottom and taken a job at a daily like she wanted to, and wasn't just a freelancer, and maybe had some support in her life and someone to kind of be there to bounce off of sometimes. We see in her early 30s that she's still floundering and she still has really messed up ideas about what she's entitled to when it comes to her career. And I think she probably would have found some really interesting success and interesting opportunities in California. But she just, you know, had selfish ideas about what her life should look like, and that she deserved to be at the New York Times, which is kind of like the creme de la creme of all the newspapers. And she just assumed that that's where she belonged without considering anything else. And she let it destroy the most mature relationship she had had to date. Even by the revival, this is the most mature relationship she's ever had. They lived together. They considered marriage. They were very much in love. And every time they had some kind of misunderstanding or miscommunication or whatever, they always came back to each other and worked it out. They apologized. Logan always owned up to his crap. He was at least self-aware. And even when Rory was at least partially at fault, Logan always came in and was like, you know, I'm sorry I did that to you. He took responsibility for his crap. And like in a way that Rory often couldn't or wouldn't or didn't. And I think, you know, going to your point about the cheating, Rory ghosted him for weeks because her birthday is in early October and Logan didn't hook up with those girls until Thanksgiving. So it seems really close in Showtime, but when you look at it on a calendar, it's like really far apart. And so if they were not together and she was completely ignoring him and they'd had a huge fight, like what was he supposed to think exactly? He was trying to get in touch with her and she couldn't even do so much as be like, I'm sorry, I need some time. Can we talk about this when things have cooled off? She couldn't even give him that. So it was her lack of communication just as much as his that led to him getting depressed and getting despondent about the breakup of the first and only good relationship he's ever had. And I don't blame him for reverting to his old ways when he thinks that Rory is done with him. He thought they broke up. And he was very honest about that with her when they came back together. So, and eventually she was able to get past it. And she says even to Jess, she tries to go and kiss him and be like, I couldn't even do what he did to me. No, that is not what happened. You are completely disregarding your own role in that whole snafu because, you know, you were the one who had an immature storm out. Well, I guess it was Logan who stormed out, but like you couldn't even so much as communicate with your boyfriend to be like, let's talk about this later. So
yes, because Logan is like the master of good communication. He doesn't do it well either. Like
he's the best of all the boyfriends, though. You got to admit, he's the best of all the boyfriends that we see.
I don't know. I mean, I think back to when Rory when she dropped out of Yale, and your girlfriend is obviously seriously struggling. She's going through a very difficult time in her life. She's having a lot of questions about like just her well-being, self-doubt. Like she's obviously struggling. And Logan is not dismissive necessarily. No, I almost say like he is in the sense that like he's absent and he's just like, whatever, Rory's gonna do what she wants to do. And it takes Jess stepping back into the picture to be like, Rory, wake up. Like, I know you're struggling. I'm not dismissive of it. Like, I get that you're going through a hard time, but I'm here to try and like wake you up from this and be like, what do we need to do? And what can I do to help you course correct to either get yourself to go back to school and finish and pursue this degree that has always been of such high regard to you in your personal life. But if that's not what you want, how can I help you then continue to pursue your own success? And what is it that is standing in your own way right now that is making you flounder in this? And Jess is there and present in Rory's life to ask those important questions and to try and give her that wake-up call, where Logan is just over here just like, yeah, she's gonna do what she's gonna do. Like, it's whatever. Like, Jess was a better boyfriend and a better person for her in her life in that moment to push her to try and be better and to get her back on track.
No, because with that, Rory was already on a bit of a downward spiral starting in season 4. She had already sort of hit some walls when it comes to school in season 4. And she was, you know, getting back on track. But then the whole Dean thing really threw her for a loop. She spent all summer with her grandma in Europe, which probably was not a great impact on her. And by the time she has the trouble with Mitchum and the dropping out of Yale, even Lorelai couldn't talk sense into her. Like, Logan recognized that Rory was going through something and that pushing her was not going to do anything. He recognized that she needed some time to sort herself out and that she was the only one who could get herself back on that path. He knew that if he tried to force it, that it would go poorly for him the way it did for Lorelai. Whereas by the time Jess shows up, Rory has already had it with her grandparents. She is already frustrated. And I think that given a couple more weeks, she would have been like, I am out of here. I'm going to do anything but this. This is no longer tenable for me. And so I think that Jess comes in a moment where she's already really vulnerable to being tipped over the edge. And all he does is cause her to reflect instead of trying to push her. Logan knew that he couldn't push her. He was like, she's going to figure this out on her own. She needs to get back there by herself. I give her a month. He says it in The Ungraduate. I think if Jess had come in The Ungraduate and said the exact same thing to her, she would have still needed that time. She needed to be able to work through it and to like get to a place on her own. And she was almost there. Jess was not uniquely positioned to get her to do anything. I think like they hadn't seen each other in a year and a half. He does not know her better than anyone. He remembers her from like being 17 and obsessed with school and obsessed with Harvard. And he thinks of her frozen in time as she was. And he knows nothing of the struggles that she's gone through in the last 2 years. He knows nothing of her struggle with Lorelai and the power struggle that went on when she tried to leave Yale. It was just a fortuitous moment where he came in and was like, what is up with this? Because I always knew you to be someone who loved school. And also when he did it, he was kind of condescending where he was like, we used to make fun of guys like that. You know, he's putting Logan down and saying like, what is up with you? When he doesn't really know this guy at all. Rory's been in a relationship with him for a year, and he just comes in acting like he knows everything, even though they haven't seen each other since he tried to get her to run away from Yale. He literally tried to get her to leave and move to New York with him.
Logan is always disparaging to the men in Rory's life. You can't and there's a lot of jealousy that's coming into play too, where he's been always Logan and the LDB has always been disparaging to Dean and putting him down. They're disparaging to Jess. So you want to talk about...
He never said anything about Dean. Never.
They make him feel so uncomfortable where Dean has to question, like, Rory, what am I doing here? Like, what is my place
They walk
here?
out the door. That's all they do. They don't say anything to him or about him. Logan immediately goes in to comfort her when he can see how upset she is by the fact that, like, Dean is the one who is insecure in that moment.
They make him feel uncomfortable. And I guarantee...
That's his insecurity, though. That's not... Logan said nothing. He never said a bad word against Dean. He never mentioned Dean, ever. They never talk about him.
No, I think it was absolutely there.
Find me the scene where he says something bad about Dean.
I will. And I will get it to you later. But it's their presence and just seeing that and just realizing that, like, what am I... Like, when... Like, that breaks my heart for Dean. And we're not talking about him. But, like, just when he even says, like, what am I doing here, Rory? Logan is just... I feel like almost in a way sometimes even too possessive over Rory, where it's like, this girl should be mine and there are going to be no other men. And he makes her worldview like just so focused on him sometimes. But I will also fault Rory for that too. Like, that's not necessarily Logan's thing, where I think Rory sometimes just hones in too much on Logan and just as the end all be all. And so that's why, like, I love when she's able to say, like, no, I don't want to be married to you because I need to actually focus on my career. But their dynamic a lot of the time was always so unhealthy to me. And I don't think that Rory, I will say this, never had a healthy dynamic with any of the men in her life, but she didn't have a good one with Logan. And just talking about what we were just discussing, I love the fact that Jess was able to step in and give her a wake-up call that Logan wasn't able to. I know you say, like, oh, like, you know, Rory needed her time, and I will agree that maybe she did, but she also needed a push. And I don't think that Logan was ever able to give her that or was going to give her that. And so I applaud Jess for stepping in and just being like, go back to school. And if you don't want to go back to school, that's also okay. But I'm here as your friend and someone who cares about you to try and push you to do better in life and move on from this current state of being that you're in, because I see it's not good for you anymore and I want more for you. And I feel like he did that better than Logan never did.
Well, because he sees her at her worst, basically, like at the end of the rope of the time off, basically. If he had seen her, you know, at the undergraduate party where they were talking about all that stuff, and she was like really, or I guess, no, it wasn't in the undergraduate. It was in New and Improved Lorelai, when they have that she's a jolly good felon party, you know. That's when Logan says, you know, I give you a month, like, you're going to be back at Yale. And he saw firsthand what happened when Lorelai tried to push Rory too hard to the path that everyone thought she should be on, even the path that Rory thought she should be on. And so Jess's timing was fortuitous. But I still think that he was wrong to come in and act like he knew what was up when he didn't. Logan was the one who was there in the trenches. He had his like European summer vacation, but Rory also had her her community service that she had to do. And, you know, the trip was kind of planned and it was what it was. And she had her grandparents and everything. But like, none of that was Logan's fault. And he even says it to her, and let me hear your balalaikas ringing out. You were the one who chose to leave Yale. You were the one who stayed out this long. You're the one who chose not to go back. You can't blame me for the choices that you made in the last 6 months. And I think, again, the timing of when these episodes drop obscures how long this has been, right? And what exactly is happening when in time. But they have that fight like not long after her birthday. So I'm thinking like mid-October is when that fight happens. And then you know, they don't speak for a while. The show makes it seem kind of tight, but it's not, because like 2 episodes later, it's Thanksgiving. And, Rory's had to go through a bunch of stuff and get out of her grandparents' house and get out on her own again, find a job, get back into school, reconcile with her mom. And that takes some time. So I ultimately think that Jess, I think part of the problem is that when they wanted to do the spinoff with Jess, they wrote him out a little bit. They had him screw the pooch at the end of their relationship. Like, their relationship in season 3 was toxic as all get out, because once he got her, he put no effort into keeping her. He was not attentive to her needs. It was just all about him. They had to bargain with each other to do anything. He wouldn't partake in her activities or things that she liked. He criticized her remaining friends with Dean. He never wanted to like do things with her except watch movies, read books, and make out. Like, that's not a good relationship. And then he bailed on her, leaves, doesn't show up again until like several months later, drops the L bomb out of nowhere. He love bombs her at the most inopportune times. And like, you want to talk about ultimatums? The end of season 4, when he comes to Yale and he's like, come on, I'm ready for you now. Come leave with me. And like, let's be together. Only say no if you really mean it. And she vehemently tells him no. Like, by then she is done with him. And we never see any hint of romantic reconnection. Even when she tries to kiss him in season 6, there's nothing there. She's like, it makes her realize exactly how much she loves Logan. And then Logan gets into that accident and he owns up to things and he reconciles with her. And she realizes exactly how true and how deep their love is. And they work it out. They make it work long distance for a while. They have their ups and downs in season 7. But ultimately, by the end of season 7, they want to spend their lives together. But Rory just has this idea in her head that somehow she can't get what she wants out of her career if she moves to California right now, without like any foresight for the fact that like there are always opportunities in the future where someday Logan might follow you. Build a foundation, start building a life, and then worry about the New York Times, because you don't always get what you want fresh out of university. She just has this idea of what her life should look like, and everything else is just, not important. And she throws away a person who deeply cares for her a little bit. And I don't necessarily blame Logan for not wanting to move backwards. And yeah. And so now that they're reconnected in their 30s and that they're still obviously so connected to each other, she still goes to London all the time to see him, and they risk everything. They risk their families finding out. They risk hurting Odette. What they're doing is playing with fire. And now that she's pregnant, she's going to have to tell him, and he's going to have to reckon with that. And if she pulls an Anna, so help me God, I'm off the Rory train forever. Cannot forgive that. She has to tell him, and she has to give him an opportunity to be a part of this kid's life. But she and Logan are at a much different place in their relationship than Lorelai and Christopher were. And I think they actually do want to be together. They just can't admit it to themselves because of the circumstances. And so I think Logan needs to man up, tell his parents, no, I'm not going to marry Odette. She's not who I want. I want to be with Rory, and she and I are going to have a baby. And they should at least give it a try, because I think they're actually more compatible, and we've seen more proof of concept of their relationship than anyone else on the show. If she's going to be with Jess in the future, I need to see a proper buildup, and I need evidence that Jess is actually the right guy for her. I don't have it. It doesn't exist. Anyone who says they're meant for each other is just like pulling stuff out of thin air, because the writers didn't write that. Thank you. I've only been preparing for this for a few months or years, maybe. I have thoughts.
Damn. I will say, as much as I still disagree, I gotta throw it to you right now. That was a remarkable argument. So I'm just sitting here,
Told you. I told you. I also want to throw in one more thing before we wrap up. there's also, I've seen, people in the fandom talking about how they're team Rory, like stay single until you find someone who's really good for you and who's actually emotionally available. And the only reason I am not on that team is because of the baby. I think that at least trying to give that kid both her parents is the best thing psychologically for everyone. I mean, if they're ultimately not right for each other and they can't make a marriage work, so be it. But just automatically assuming that Logan's not going to be a good dad or not letting him at least have that option, like, she doesn't have to take the same path as Lorelai. And that's why I really dislike that part of the revival where she goes to Christopher, and Christopher sort of legitimizes Lorelai's choice to choose single motherhood to the detriment of all else, to like the well-being of a lot of different people. And I don't want Rory to make the same mistake and to have her child so cut off from the rest of her family. And so, if she weren't pregnant, I would say, yeah, sure. But single motherhood is hard, y'all. And if Logan wants to be with Rory and to be a part of that kid's life, Rory really needs to let him. And she really needs to let herself accept his love and his involvement, because I think that she really does love him, and that there's just a lot of complicated stuff in their history that she's having a hard time voicing what she wants because she has been burnt in the past, and so has he. And so it's hard. But I think that, Logan should let Odette be free and should tell his parents to get out of his life, or at least to not try to control him so much. He should probably leave the Huntsberger family business, and maybe they can live in Hartford and be near Lorelai, because she's going to be planted in Stars Hollow forever now that she wants to buy an annex for the inn. And I don't see Jess wanting to move back to Connecticut. I think he's happy in his life. He says he's stable. He probably needs someone who's a little more his speed. And frankly, Rory probably doesn't deserve him. But, Rory may not deserve a happy ending, but her daughter does deserve a happy family. And so I think Logan will be a better dad than he had. I think he's self-aware enough to know that with his kid, he needs to be better. And I hope all of them go to therapy. That's all I got to say. I'm done. I'm off my soapbox. I'm out.
That was a miraculous soapbox.
Thank you.
I will say, again, yeah, I commend your efforts. You made fantastic arguments. You still have not swayed me this evening. I am still in the Team Jess camp. There are a lot of things that we didn't talk about. Lorelai's response to both Jess and Logan as individuals, the felony.
Yeah, we'll have a whole episode on the felony.
There's a lot that we're gonna have to circle back on.
Yeah. Oh, and okay, soapbox one more time. Logan was the one who went to Lorelai whenever he had problems with Rory. He was the one who went to Lorelai to ask for permission to ask her to marry him. Even Luke got on Team Logan by Vineyard Valentine. Logan respected her family a lot more than any of the other boyfriends. Or was at least sort of better integrated, and they understood each other better because they came from similar worlds. And Lorelai only got sort of a small picture of Logan during the early relationship, and she let her those early ideas and also some of Mitchum's influence impact how she felt about Logan, and never discussed it any further with Rory. She really should have done that. But, Logan had enough gumption to go to her for advice to help get Rory back when he knew he screwed up. And to me, that says a lot about his respect. And I love that conversation they have in the kitchen too in season 7, where they really finally start to get each other. And Lorelai is probably less judgmental of Rory than she should be when she finds out that she's cheating with Logan. It's she's not surprised. She knows that there's a lot there. And I haven't really seen a proper, it seems like she's not in a bad place with Jess, but we haven't really seen any proper reconciliation or understanding between them beyond just being civil to each other during the wedding prep. Okay, soapbox is away again.
Yeah. Again, we're gonna have to, and we will circle back to a lot of the points that we didn't get to this evening. So keep watching us because we will talk about this more in the future. Again, I'm still not in the Team Logan camp. You did effectively sway me off of the Team Dean camp, and we admitted that, and we talked about that last week. I am still not off of the Team Jess train, despite your efforts tonight, and I commend you for them. You did well. I'm still not there. I'm still in the Team Jess camp. But if you're watching this, just weigh in. Anything that you think, any thoughts that you have, anything that we didn't talk about that you want us to maybe touch on in the future. We'll get there because we still have a lot more to say, the both of us, trust me.
Yeah, this is just the tip of the iceberg of my notes on this matter.
Yeah. Tip of the iceberg, and we're almost at like a 2-hour mark.
Yeah, well.
We have thoughts, and we've always had thoughts. We'll have more thoughts. In the meantime, while you wait for us to flesh those out, go back and watch some of our old videos. Go back and watch part 1 last week. It was a really good lead up to whatever this bloodbath knockout round was this week. We're not going to declare a winner.
We'll let you be the judge.
Yeah. And even then, we'll probably still just have thoughts and contention about it. But we're really glad to be able to have this discussion. We hope it was fun for you to watch. We hope that you enjoyed it. Again, go back and watch some of our old videos while you wait for the next week's episode, which, speaking of, what have we got coming up next?
So a couple months ago, we did an episode on motherhood, and I promised that there would be more talk about that. And so next week, we're going to dig into the ideas of working mothers versus stay-at-home mothers and, single mothers who are kind of like forced into both roles a little bit, and how the show differentiates and treats these different life paths for women. I think it's really interesting. I recently watched a show called Fleischman is in Trouble. If you get a chance, check it out. It's only 8 episodes. And I think it's a really interesting dive into, what working mothers really go through and what what stay-at-home mothers go through as well. I think there's a really interesting conversation to be had there. And it's going to be interesting because the show has some very particular portrayals, and I'm really excited to get to them. I don't want to spoil too much here. I'm almost saying too much. We've run too long already, so just a little tease that next week should be very interesting.
Yep. Working moms next week. We hope that you'll come back and join us for that. In the meantime, again, watch our old videos and please do all of those YouTube things for us. Like this video, subscribe to our channel. You can check us out on social media. All of those accounts are in the description below. And let us know what team you're on and where you felt. If we've swayed you tonight, if we haven't, just give us all of your thoughts. We're so excited to read what you think about the men in the show as well. But I think we need to close this out here. Otherwise, we'll literally talk for like another 4 million hours if you let us on the men.
Of course.
So good talk, good debate. It's still Team Jess all day, every day, but
Team good. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
baby.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Oh my gosh, it's the worst mug ever.
It's the best mug ever. Thank you, Etsy. I forget the seller, but love it.
Yep. But come back and join us next week. And just thank you for always being here and for all of your support. So until then, we will see you next Friday night for dinner.
Bye.
Bye.